Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a sunrise you'll never forget. Soft, golden light stretching across an ocean of sand, riverbanks lush with palm trees and distant drum beats echoing over mud brick rooftops. You're in 14th century West Africa now, specifically the early morning heart of the Mali Empire. And in this world where gold lies so close to the surface it shimmers like dust in your footprints, a boy is about to grow up into the richest man the world has ever sort of forgotten. That boy is Mansa Musa. And yes, you probably won't survive this timeline, not because it's dangerous, but because the wealth politics and camelback journeys through the Sahara require a level of hydration you're definitely not ready for. And sunscreen. Not invented yet. Good luck with that. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I always read the comments with a smile. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wind comes off the Niger River, carrying the scent of damp reeds, distant charcoal fires, and early morning millet porridge. You stretch. Your bed is just a palm fiber mat, but it did the trick. As your bare feet touch the cool earthen floor, a servant lifts the woven curtain that separates your chamber from the rising sun. The world outside is already awake. The air shivers with motion, merchants balancing baskets on their heads. Fishermen untangling their nets and griots, tuning their stringed koras ready to sing the day's memory into being. You don't know it yet, but your story will one day live in their music. You're still young. The name Musa isn't famous yet. Right now, you're simply a noble child in the royal court of Mali, one of many cousins, nephews, and contenders swirling around the throne. Your world is one of protocol and poetry. You speak Mande at home, but Arabic is the language of scholars, and you already understand more of it than your tutors realize. The palace isn't made of marble. It's molded from sun-baked mud and timber brushed every year by the hands of the people. Because in this empire even royalty knows maintenance is sacred. You sit near the veranda, sipping lightly spiced tea, not because caffeine is a thing, but because it's warm and you like the smell. Beyond the palace walls, the city of Niani stirs. It's a patchwork of sunlit courtyards, thatched rooftops, and tiny alleyways, where children play with balls made of leather and rags. The marketplaces are already loud. Early trade is a good trade. Gold dust exchanges hands in tiny gourds measured with astonishing precision. Salt, carried from the desert, gleams like silver bricks stacked high beside woven mats and dried fish. Historians still argue whether Musa was born directly into power or whether he rose from a lesser branch of the royal family. Some say he was the deputy ruler appointed as a placeholder while the king went on a journey and never returned. Others believe Musa's rise was part fortune, part ambition. Either way, the sun is rising and your time is approaching. But for now, you're still just watching, listening, learning how empires breathe. You follow your father to court. It's not a courtroom in the modern sense. There are no wigs or gavels. Instead, it's a circle of men seated cross-legged on woven mats, their words soft but firm. Disputes are resolved not with shouting, but with proverbs and compromise. Your people have no written constitution, but they know justice better than some with parchment and pens. Later that morning, a caravan arrives. You hear it before you see it, the bray of camels, the jingle of harnesses, the thud of feet on dust. Merchants from the north. Tuareg traders wrapped in indigo-dyed robes, blue skin staining their faces where sweat meets fabric. They bring rock-salt horses and news. Always news. You sneak a glance at the maps. They carry lines scratched on leather dots representing distant cities, Gao, Walata, even the fabled Timbuktu. You wonder if you'll ever see them. Spoiler, you will. As the sun climbs higher, you sit beneath a shade tree and listen to the court griot recite a lineage so long it wraps around the morning like a golden bracelet. Your ancestors' names, warriors, poets, kings, are not just history. They're memory. Living, breathing, sung into permanence. And yet somewhere in the hum of the noon breeze, your own name hovers like a seed. Unplanted, unnoticed, but destined to grow. You lean against the clay wall as the midday sun presses down on Niani, the capital of your world. The air smells like roasted millet and wood smoke, and someone nearby is pounding baobab leaves into a green paste that will become dinner. You watch. You listen. You are still a boy, but your ears are sharp, and you're already learning which silences matter more than words. The court bustles today. A message has arrived from the fringes of the empire, where the great Senegal and Gambia rivers wind through forests and savannas. News travels slowly here across an empire that stretches over 1,000 miles. Still, it arrives borne by men with sand in their cloaks and stories in their eyes. Mali isn't a single place. It's many. And, like the mighty Niger River, it bends and branches. Towns like Jen and Gao cities with markets and mosques all pay allegiance to the Lion of Mali, the Emperor or Mansa. But they each have their own rhythms, their own languages, their own ways of tying a turban or blessing the morning fire. You begin to understand this as you grow. That to rule Mali is not to speak louder, it is to listen longer. And what a kingdom it is. Mali, in your time, stretches across what we'd now call Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Mali, of course, and parts of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Nigeria. That's a lot. And most of it is connected by rivers and roads carved not by machines, but by hooves and sandaled feet. Historians still argue whether Niani was truly the capital. Some believe it was more symbolic a spiritual heart, while real administrative power pulsed in cities like Timbuktu or Gao. But for now, as the child who would be king, Niani is your home base, your training ground. As you age, you begin to follow the senior nobles into their chambers. You sit cross-legged behind pillars while they discuss trade deals, conflict resolution, and the harvest. You don't talk, but your presence is noted. You're quiet observant, like gold hidden in cloth. Speaking of gold, let's talk about that. Mali practically breathes the stuff. The land is so rich in it that people use it as casually as salt elsewhere. But, ironically, despite the legend, it's not actually used for coins. No cowries, those tiny white seashells, are the real currency for everyday folk. Gold is for the big things. Tribute. Dowries. Building mosques so grand they'll outlast earthquakes and dynasties. And yet, no one in your youth makes a fuss about wealth. Gold isn't displayed, it's worn with modest pride. There's no bling, just weight, responsibility. You begin to see how power is expressed not by accumulation, but by generosity. A leader is measured by what he gives away, not what he keeps. You also begin to hear stories, whispers really, of a man named Abubakari II, the Mansa before the Mansa. Some say he was your cousin. Others say your uncle. Either way, he did something unusual. He sailed away. Yes, really. According to griots and some Arab chroniclers, Abu Bakari got it into his head that there was land across the Western Sea beyond the horizon. He supposedly built a fleet of 2,000 ships and just left. Never came back. You hear this story many times, growing up, each version stranger than the last. Some say he drowned. Others claim he found paradise. Historians still argue whether the voyage even happened, but you believe it. Because, ambition doesn't always come with a return ticket. It's this voyage that changes everything. Because when Abu Bakari disappears, someone has to rule. And that someone becomes you. Well, eventually. You're appointed Deputy Mansa first, like a regent, a caretaker. You hold the scepter while the world figures out whether Abu Bakari is truly gone for good. Spoiler, he is. As you begin to take on this role, your life transforms. You no longer wake when you wish. Your food is tasted first. Your garments are inspected. You move with an entourage. Your footsteps echo through palaces. The air around you changes thicker with expectation, heavier with silence. Your jokes don't land the same way. People nod instead of laughing. You miss the days when you could disappear into the mango orchards with a handful of friends and no one cared. Now, even your pauses are political, but still you rise to it. You learn to speak with dignity, to hold your hands just so when accepting tribute. You master the art of stillness. A stillness that says, I know what I'm doing even when I don't. At night, you lie under the stars on a palace roof, the stone still warm beneath your back. You listen to the Niger whisper below, wondering if your cousin ever reached the edge of the world or if it reached him first. And beneath those stars, still young, not yet legendary, you whisper to yourself the promise you won't remember making. You will not sail west. You will walk east, and the world will remember your footsteps. The desert wind carries tales faster than horses ever could. You're older now, and your title is no longer just ceremonial. People bow deeper. Your decisions ripple wider. The empire no longer sees you as a placeholder. You are the Mansa now, not officially yet, but in every way that matters. And with that power comes paperwork. Well, not paper exactly, more like verbal reports, messengers, and carved tablets handed to you in hushed tones. You sit under the shade of the palace awning, as court scribes whisper the affairs of 1,000 villages into your ear. There's a drought in the north, a merchant caravan robbed near Gao, a marriage between two noble families in the west, potentially too convenient to be accidental. You nod. You speak sparingly. Every word is weighed like gold dust in a copper bowl, but still quietly you begin to plan. Because while your predecessor may have disappeared into the sea, you intend to leave a mark much closer to home. You've always known Mali was powerful, but now you want the world to know it too. And so you start to think of the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Every devout Muslim must make it at least once. But you don't just want to go. You want to arrive. Historians still argue whether your Hajj was motivated by pure faith political strategy or a show of opulence. The truth. Probably all three. You're a devout Muslim, yes, but you're also a master of message. And nothing sends a message louder than showing up to the holiest city in Islam with an entourage so large it creates its own economy. You begin preparation years in advance. First, the math. You'll be crossing the Sahara Desert, thousands of miles of open sand, scorching sun, and occasional bandits who consider camel tax a viable retirement plan. You'll need food, water, shelter, guards, interpreters, and, of course, gold. Lots and lots of gold. You start by stockpiling it. Not by mining more, you already have plenty, but by ensuring its safe movement. You build supply depots, trade, outposts, water wells. You arrange alliances with tribal leaders across the desert, promising protection gifts and tax breaks if they assist your caravan's passage. In return, they pledge peace and water skins. Next comes the people. You're not going alone. That would be humble, which is fine for some rulers. But you're a symbol. You gather 60,000 followers for your pilgrimage. 60,000. That's enough people to fill an entire modern sports stadium, and then some. Among them, warriors with gold-handled spears, servants dressed in brocades, musicians, cooks, and scholars. You also bring 12,000 slaves each, carrying 4 pounds of gold. Again, you bring 12,000 people just to carry the gold. Because this isn't a camping trip. This is the single most luxurious road trip of the medieval world. You ride near the front, of course. Your saddle is gilded. Your robes shimmer. But you still squint against the desert wind just like everyone else. The Sahara doesn't care how rich you are. It'll still try to peel the skin off your nose if you ride too long without a face cloth. Still, you press on. The camels sway slow and rhythmic. Their steps make no sound on the sand. At night, the stars burn white-hot above your camp. Fires crackle. Someone is always singing somewhere. And as you travel through cities like Walata and Taghaza, people pour out of their homes to watch. Children stare. Elders bow. Traders try not to drool. They've never seen anything like this. Because there has never been anything like this. You don't just pass through. You give. At every stop, you drop coins into the hands of the poor. You commission mosques, fund schools, free slaves. You turn every resting point into a moment of legend. And the world begins to notice. The Arab chroniclers will write about this for centuries. European map makers will sketch your name and crown it with gold leaf. But right now, you're just trying not to lose your voice from all the speeches. One night, as your caravan rests beneath a half-moon sky, a scout approaches with word you're nearing Cairo. You smile. That city has no idea what's about to hit it. You arrive at the gates of Cairo not like a man, but like a phenomenon. The city blinks in disbelief as the dust settles and your caravan crests the horizon. 60,000 followers. Dozens of camels draped in fine cloth. Gold staffs glinting in the sun. And a retinue of guards that stretches so far back the tail end of your company hasn't even seen the Nile yet. You dismount slowly. Not to be dramatic, although let's be honest, you've earned it, but because your robe is weighted with gold embroidery, and you're not about to trip in front of the Mamluk elite. That would be memorable, but not in the way you want. The local officials aren't quite sure what to do with you. After all, kings arrive in Cairo from time to time. But not like this. Not with their own gold-tented pavilions. Not with enough currency to single-handedly destabilize the economy. And certainly not with musicians who play instruments the Egyptians have never seen before. You're ushered into the palace of Sultan al-Nasir. There's some awkwardness. Protocols to observe. Gifts to exchange. You offer gold, of course, so much that the attendants go silent, trying to count the amount before giving up entirely. You also present embroidered robes, trained falcons, and books written by scholars from your court. Historians still argue whether the Sultan met you warmly or warily. Some sources say he was honored. Others suggest he bristled, perhaps jealous of the attention you were receiving. But in every version, one thing is consistent. Cairo was never the same after you passed through it. You spend weeks in the city, long enough to leave behind not just stories, but consequences. Because here's the twist, you're too generous. Wherever you go in Cairo, you give away gold. Not a coin here or there, but handfuls. You tip musicians with enough to retire. You pay merchants double their asking price. You fund mosque renovations, endow scholars free slaves in your name. It's glorious, and also disastrous. You cause inflation, real economic shock. The value of gold in Cairo plummets because you've dumped so much of it into circulation that it becomes temporarily just a shiny rock. Prices soar. Markets wobble. Merchants love you. Economists, less so. You probably didn't mean to do it. You were just being a good Muslim, a good guest, a good ruler. But this is what happens when your generosity operates at empire-level wattage. You become a walking monetary event. And still people love you, because your wealth is not arrogant. It's artful. You walk through the streets without a crown, but you wear respect like a robe. You listen to local scholars. You attend prayers. You fund hospitals. You're not a tourist, you're a benefactor. The stories of your visit spread not as gossip, but as gospel. One Cairo merchant will still be talking about you 30 years later to a wandering traveler named Ibn Khaldun. That's how legends stick. And yet, for all the spectacle, your thoughts aren't stuck in the moment. They're looking ahead, because this journey has purpose. You didn't just come to dazzle Cairo or drop gold on the sidewalks like flower petals. You came to Mecca, to fulfill a sacred duty, to connect your empire with the spiritual heart of your faith. So, when the time comes, you leave Cairo behind your caravan, thinned a little by donations, but still enormous. You head east across more desert toward the holy city. The journey is quieter now, more focused. You spend more time in prayer, more time in silence. The laughter is softer, the music gentler. You feel the pull of something greater than yourself. And finally, after months of travel spectacle and gold, you arrive at Mecca. There is no parade, no inflation, no audience with a sultan. Just the soft hum of devotion, the press of bodies in shared reverence, and the silence of the sacred. You complete your pilgrimage not as a king, but as a believer. Wrapped in simple white garments, indistinguishable from the thousands of others. In that moment, stripped of jewels, power, and title, you remember who you are beneath it all. Musa, a man, a servant of God, a pilgrim in a world of dust and stars. And when you rise, prayer complete, you look east one last time toward the land that raised you, the empire that waits, and the cities still to build. It's time to go home. The journey home begins not with a fanfare, but with the quiet jingle of camel bells at sunrise. You mount your steed slowly, garments lighter, now heart heavier in the best kind of way. The desert doesn't feel quite as daunting as before. You've been reshaped by holy ground, your soul polished like a stone, smoothed by time and prayer. But let's be real. You're still traveling with a small city on your back. Your return caravan is smaller than the one that arrived in Cairo, sure. But it's still enormous by every reasonable standard. You've given away literal tons of gold, but you've also collected things, manuscripts, rare spices, new instruments, and perhaps most importantly, minds. You didn't just spend your time in Mecca praying. You were recruiting. You return to Mali with Islamic scholars from Arabia, architects from Cairo, artists from Africa, and engineers who speak 5 languages but still can't pronounce Timbuktu properly. You've built a brain trust, a mobile university, a traveling renaissance before the word even exists, because while you may have changed spiritually, your political vision has sharpened. You saw cities built from stone and symmetry, humming with ideas and trade. And now you want Mali to have that, but on your terms, West African terms, blending Saharan dust with sacred geometry. Historians still argue whether you truly intended to transform Timbuktu into a global intellectual capital, or if it simply evolved that way thanks to your investments. But no one disputes that, when you returned, you began building like a man on a mission. The ride across the Sahara is grueling. Yes, the sun is relentless. The sand stings your face like salt thrown at a wound. But you press on. Your companions joke less now. The thrill of wealth has worn off. What remains is reverence. You pass familiar towns, Walata, Taghaza. In Taghaza, the salt mines glisten in the heat, men hacking white bricks from the earth like sculptors in reverse. You smile faintly as you pass. This is the other gold of Mali, the less shiny one, the one that preserves food, pays porters, and makes your empire run. Back in Niani, word spreads before your camels even crest the horizon. Mansa Musa returns. Children climb onto rooftops for a glimpse. Traders gather hoping for news. Courtiers rehearse their bows. And your family, yes, even the distant cousins who once plotted sideways glances at your throne, they come to greet you. You don't make a speech. That's not your way. You walk calmly into your palace, kneel in prayer, and then summon your architects, because the building begins immediately. You commission mosques, not just 12s, across the empire, from Gao to Timbuktu to Jen. Some are constructed from sun-dried bricks and timber beams, others from cut stone, imported tile, and coral red clay. You don't impose Arab architecture blindly, you merge it with local tradition. Flat roofs, wooden stakes, sweeping archways, Islamic faith in Sahelian skin. You also establish schools, madrasas, not just for religious studies, but for math, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. You want your people to know not just how to pray, but how to think. And then comes the crown jewel, the University of Sankore in Timbuktu. It already existed in some form before you, but under your reign it becomes a beacon. Scholars from across the Islamic world travel to its libraries. Manuscripts pile high written in Arabic, Songhai Fulani. Some say over 400,000 documents once lived there, quietly defying time and termites. And while all this rises, you also begin shaping your court. You elevate advisors who can read both the Quran and a market trend. You train scribes to write contracts, not just poetry. You turn your palace into a brain. But here's the best part, you don't rule like a tyrant. You don't sit on a golden throne demanding silence. You walk among your people. You listen to griots sing your deeds, not with fear, but pride. And when a fisherman presents you with a rare catch from the Niger, you don't just accept it. You ask how the waters are running this year. You remember what it felt like to be that boy sitting in the shadows of the court. And now you're the sun those shadows bend around. Still, not everyone is thrilled. Some elders grumble about all the new foreign ideas. Some merchants worry you're spending too much on stone and scrolls instead of spices and roots. And yes, some local leaders wonder whether the mosques are too large, too fast, too loud. But you nod, you listen, and you keep building. Because while gold can be spent, burned, buried, or stolen knowledge that lasts, and you intend to leave more than a legend. You intend to leave memory, in brick, in parchment, in song. The sun is high above Timbuktu, casting crisp shadows against the flat walls of freshly built mosques. You step out into the courtyard of one such structure, your sandals brushing over smooth earth packed firm by thousands of feet. Students, imams, traders, travelers, all coming to see what Mali has become under your hand. And what they find is something unexpected. Because it turns out your empire's greatest export isn't gold anymore, it's ideas. People have started calling Timbuktu a city of light. Not the flickering candlelit kind, but the metaphorical glow that comes from ink and speech and debate. The University of Sankore, nestled inside its famous mosque, buzzes with conversations about everything from Islamic law to the healing properties of honey. You walk among its scholars in the early morning hours, your robe trailing the dust, listening in on soft arguments over celestial calculations and trade ethics. You've turned Timbuktu into a kind of magnetic pole for knowledge. Word has spread along the trans-Saharan routes. If you want to study, if you want to teach, if you want to be remembered, you go south, not east. Historians still argue whether the university rivaled those in Cairo or Baghdad. But in this moment, as you stand beneath the carved wooden beams, watching students recite verse by memory, you're not interested in comparisons. You're building something no map can quite contain. Of course, gold still flows. It has to. Without it, your architects can't build, your libraries can't grow, and your army can't patrol the borders where the desert tries to creep into your cities. But increasingly, you think of gold less like treasure and more like ink. Something to be poured out carefully to write a future that won't fade. You visit Jen next. It's another jewel in the river's crown, a city built of mud that somehow feels more permanent than stone. Here, you commission one of your grandest constructions, the Great Mosque. Or at least its earliest form, what will one day evolve into the iconic structure known around the world. Its mud brick towers are smoothed each year by the hands of hundreds, a ritual that blurs the line between maintenance and worship. The people here speak Bambara and Bozo, but your reputation speaks louder. They call you generous. Not because you give away money, but because you share power. You appoint local leaders to govern their own, as long as they respect the broader law. You don't micromanage an empire of thousands of miles. You water its roots and trust the tree to grow. You've learned this: empires don't expand by conquest alone. They breathe through culture. You don't stamp Mali's name onto every city, you let each city tell its own story, woven with threads of Islam trade and ancestral tradition. Your empire isn't a hammer, it's a loom. One afternoon, you sit beside the Niger River, watching fishermen cast nets from narrow boats. The breeze smells like wet silt and mangoes. You're older now. Your beard shows streaks of gray, and your joints protest when you rise. But your eyes are still sharp, especially when they fall on something new, a set of scrolls brought to you from Egypt. The scholar who presents them is barely out of his 20s, but already has the wisdom of someone twice his age. He bows deeply, hands trembling slightly, and speaks to you in slow, reverent tones. He doesn't just want a reward, he wants your opinion. So you read, slowly, carefully. The words discuss astronomy, the stars, the movement of planets, and buried within them a theory that the Earth might not be the center of everything. You pause, raise an eyebrow, and smile. Not because you agree, but because you're glad someone is asking. You fund his work, quietly, anonymously. You don't need your name on every page. You just want the page to exist. Elsewhere, your court is buzzing. Traders from Morocco bring in silks dyed blue as twilight. Artisans from Hausaland arrive with glass beads and carved ivory. Your palace becomes a mosaic of languages and smells. You hold court in the cool of the morning, eat dried dates and spiced millet by afternoon, and retire with scholars to talk law and legends beneath stars so bright they seem to lean down to listen. You're a king, yes, but also a curator, a gardener, a believer that a book can last longer than a throne. And yet quietly you begin to sense something else. A shift, not in your empire, in you. Because all this is beginning to feel like legacy. You no longer wake thinking of conquest. You wake thinking of balance. How to keep the salt flowing, the roads safe, the scrolls dry during the rainy season. You think of who will remember you, and more importantly, how. You stand on your palace balcony one night and look toward the desert. It's just sand and silence out there. But somewhere beyond that horizon, your name is already whispered by people who've never seen your face. Mansa Musa, the man who gave away so much gold the world trembled. The king who turned books into monuments. The pilgrim who walked to Mecca and came back with something more precious than treasure, a vision. Morning comes slowly now. You wake not to the clang of ceremonial drums or the shouts of couriers, but to birdsong and the rustling of palm fronds outside your window. The palace is quieter than it used to be, and you no longer leap out of bed. Instead, you sit first. Breathe. Let your body remember its duties before it performs them. You're not old, not by the standards of your time, but the years have etched themselves into your spine. You walk a little slower. Your hand sometimes trembles when you raise the cup of sweetened tea to your lips. But no one dares rush you. You're not just a king, now you're something larger. You're the king who came back. In the eyes of your people, you're myth already, and yet you still attend court. You still listen. This morning, a group of Songhai elders has traveled for days to meet you. They bring gifts, dried meat wrapped in reed leaves, obsidian jewelry, and a carved wooden figurine of a lion. The figure is heavy in your palm. The elder smiles and says nothing. You nod. You understand. The lion is you. They speak of border disputes and flooding on the eastern tributaries. You listen. They're not asking for gold. They're asking for fairness. And you offer it not as decree, but as dialogue. You suggest shared patrols, mixed councils. You let the solution grow from their voices, not just your own. Historians still argue whether your reign was truly just or whether the records were polished by griots loyal to the crown. But fairness is felt not written, and right now you're living it. After court, you walk through the city without escort. People greet you softly, bowing just enough to be respectful, but not enough to stop moving. Life goes on. Markets clatter with laughter. Children chase chickens. A woman sells groundnut stew near the mosque, the aroma so rich it follows you like a question. You hungry old man. You smile and keep walking. You arrive at the mosque, your mosque, the one built from your pilgrimage and your prayers. The imam meets you there. You sit beside him in the shade and talk quietly about stars. Not politics, not gold, just stars. the way they seemed to hang closer when you were in Mecca, the way they seem quieter here. Later, a young student presents you with a scroll. His hands shake. He's written a history, your history, or part of it. It's clumsy in places, exaggerated in others. He claims your army once defeated 1,000 Moroccan horsemen using only shadows and sandstorms. You don't correct him. Instead, you tell him, write what inspires. Just don't forget what's real, because the truth is you've become a strange mixture of the two. Every day, someone brings you a tale you don't remember living. Did you really make gold rain in Cairo? Did your camel train really stretch from Timbuktu to the Red Sea? Did you build a mosque in a single day? Maybe, maybe not. But the point was never the details. It was the effect. You've made Mali feel possible. Not just rich, not just powerful, but lasting. You meet with your sons that evening. There are many of them. Too many, perhaps. You watch them speak to each other in polite tones, each weighing their words like coins. You know what they're thinking. You were once the same, watching a father age, wondering what would be left behind besides titles and dust. You don't name a successor. Not yet. You're waiting. Watching. Legacy is not just built in temples, it's grown in temperament. But you do give a few parting instructions. You ask that the scholars be protected, that the salt trade remain untaxed through Timbuktu, that the mosque in Jannah receive repairs before the next rains. Small things, specific things, not the stuff of legends, just things that matter. As you walk back to your chambers, the stars rise again, those same stars you followed across the desert. They look unchanged. And yet you know they've seen you change. You pause at the balcony. Below, the city hums. Lanterns flicker. A griot's voice rises over the rooftops, retelling the tale of your journey across the Sahara. It's more dramatic than you remember. You're described as taller, louder, able to turn camels with a whisper. You shake your head and laugh softly. But you don't stop him, because tonight you don't want to be remembered for your accuracy. You want to be remembered at all. And in this quiet night, with the wind rustling the thatch, and your breath as even as the drumbeat of a distant festival, you realize you already are. You don't attend every council meeting now. You let others speak first. You nod from the back sometimes, offering nothing more than a raised eyebrow, a slow blink, or the smallest smile. But when you do speak, the room hushes like the wind pausing before a storm. Your word still carries weight not because it's loud, but because it's final. This afternoon, your vizier reads a letter from a merchant in Granada. A shipment of Andalusian textiles has arrived, and they want to trade for Mali's salt and ivory. You approve it not because you care about silks. Your robes are already fine, but because it means one more line between your empire and the wider world. And lines, when drawn correctly, become legacies. In Timbuktu, a scholar has translated a medical manuscript from Persian. He sends a sample to the palace pages describing surgical techniques using date palm fiber and honey. You hold it in your hands, marveling not at the words, but at the journey the knowledge took thousands of miles past from scholar to scholar like a sacred flame. You order it copied, not once, but 10 times. Because knowledge should multiply, not sit in one gilded room. You're walking the palace gardens now, your footsteps crunching gently on gravel. The air smells of papaya and rain-soaked earth. A servant walks a few paces behind, respectfully silent. You wave him off. You want to be alone for this. The path leads to a quiet bench beneath a tamarind tree. You sit. It creaks familiarly. You've sat here many times after court, after disputes, after victories. But today, there's no need for reflection. You just enjoy. A mango drops from the tree with a plop. A small child rushes from the garden path, grabs it, looks at you with wide eyes, then runs. You don't laugh, but the corners of your mouth lift. He'll remember that moment for years, the day he stole a mango from the king. Or maybe the king gave it to him. Memory is slippery like that. Historians still argue whether you ruled with a soft hand or a quiet fist, whether your justice was merciful or firm. But the griots say you walked slowly, listened often, and rarely repeated yourself. That sounds about right. You've begun to delegate more. Your sons, your nephews, your trusted advisors. They handle the daily noise. You focus on what lasts. You meet with poets. You fund architects. You oversee the repair of a bridge swept away in the rainy season. You don't need to be everywhere anymore. Your empire knows who you are, and yet change never sleeps. The world around you is shifting. A new route has opened further north, one that bypasses some of your cities. Trade patterns whisper of alternative paths. New powers stir across the desert. In the distance, the winds of competition begin to blow. You feel it not in panic, but in awareness. Empires are like seasons. You've made Mali bloom. But you know better than to expect eternal spring. And so you start to think in stone. You double down on construction. Not new palaces, your rooms are already too large, but libraries, granaries, wells, the things people forget until they desperately need them. You commission maps, hand-drawn and sun-bleached, showing rivers, roads, and places with no names yet. You want Mali to understand itself, not just through legend, but through landscape. You even begin writing more, not publicly, but in a collection of scrolls locked inside your study. Reflections, instructions, notes to the rulers who will come after you. You don't know if they'll read them, but it helps to write them down anyway. One day, a traveler arrives at your court, a man from Venice. Or so he claims. He speaks through 3 interpreters and bows so low he nearly falls over. He brings you a gift, a tiny glass mirror. You've never seen yourself like this before. Not in such sharp clarity. You peer into it and see. Not the Mansa. Not the pilgrim. Not the king who broke Cairo's economy with kindness. You see a tired man. A full man. A man who built, gave, and walked further than anyone thought possible. You hand the mirror back gently. You keep it, you say. Mali already knows what I look like. And then you rise the dust of the path, clinging to your robe like memory. Because even kings leave footprints. You rise later these days. Not out of laziness, but because the morning no longer demands your presence, it waits for you. The empire runs on the pulse you've already set like a drumbeat that continues long after the drummer has stepped away. In Timbuktu, scribes dip their brushes into ink and copy manuscripts by the dozen. The smell of parchment and lamp oil fills the city's alleys. Down by the river banks, fishermen still call out to each other in rhythm, casting nets into water that remembers the weight of 1,000 years of trade. And everywhere you go there are stories. Some sung, some whispered, some wildly inaccurate but too delightful to correct. They call you the Golden King, the Lion of Mali. Some even say your footsteps turned sand to coin. You're flattered, of course, but mildly amused, especially considering you once tripped over a tent rope outside Mecca and landed in a camel's breakfast. Historians still argue whether your wealth was exaggerated, inflated by travelers and European cartographers desperate to believe in a land of endless riches. But here's the funny part. Even the exaggerations don't quite capture the scale of what you've done. You didn't just spend gold, you redirected its purpose. You used it to move ideas, to stitch trade routes with libraries, to plant faith and harvest understanding. But the world beyond Mali has taken the bait. European map makers now sketch your empire with gold leaf and outsized crowns. The Catalan Atlas will someday place you on a throne in the heart of Africa, holding a nugget the size of a melon. You've become shorthand for myth, a symbol of black royalty, wealth, and possibility in a world that usually erases such stories. You didn't plan that, but you don't mind it either. What's surprising, however, is how distant it all feels. The world keeps growing, and you older now feel more like a constellation than a star. Fixed, bright, but far away. You spend your evenings in the garden, sipping infusions of ginger and mint, wrapped in silence that feels more earned than lonely. Some nights the griots visit, and play softly beside your chambers, their strings weaving tales you don't recognize until you hear your name. One night, one of them sings of a time you faced down a rebellious noble with nothing but your gaze. You don't recall it happening quite like that, but you let it pass, because myths serve a purpose too. Meanwhile, the empire thrives. Caravans arrive from the east bearing silk and spices. Tuareg traders pass through the salt cities with camels so overburdened you wonder if the animals have formed a union. And in your cities, the call to prayer rises 5 times a day, marking time not by sundials or bells, but by faith. You begin to host delegations from beyond Africa, Arabs, Berbers, even the occasional curious European. You meet them in open-air courtyards shaded by wide canopies, with tea served in glass cups, and dates arranged like little golden pyramids. You speak through interpreters, but your presence speaks volumes. One visitor asks how much gold you truly have. You lean back and answer simply, "Enough to build what matters," because what matters has changed. You don't count your legacy in gold bars or camels. You count it in schools, bridges, wells, and scrolls. In names remembered by children who never saw your face. In languages that learned how to speak each other's truth because you opened the door. And you've opened many. Your empire is not perfect. There are tensions, as always, jealous nobles, border disputes, fluctuations in trade. But it holds. It breathes. It evolves. And you've come to see something unexpected. You are no longer the heart of Mali. You are its memory. A living one for now, but a memory all the same. And somehow that feels right, because long after your gold is spent, your books misplaced, your buildings weathered by wind and time, your story will still be told, in rhythm, in song, in starlight, and that you think may be the greatest wealth of all. You no longer keep a tight grip on the reins of power, not because you've grown weak, but because you've grown wise. The hands that once held Mali's fate now rest open. You've trained others, delegated, trusted, and now your empire begins to move with a rhythm that doesn't require your constant touch. It's strange at first. You watch decisions being made in council chambers without your direct approval. You hear judgments passed that you didn't write. Roads, planned expeditions, launched trades, negotiated all in your name, but no longer by your hand. And yet, it works. Your empire is growing up, and like any wise parent, you let it. You spend more time now in the Hall of Records. It's not much of a hall, really, more of a cool room with clay walls and tall wooden shelves. But here, your scribes keep documents stacked like sleeping thoughts. Treaties, market logs, tax agreements, letters from foreign courts, and notes from scholars whose handwriting curves like river reeds. You leaf through them slowly, your fingers trailing the ink. You find joy in the details: who sold how many camels, what rainfall was like last season, how a town on the border invented a better water wheel, using nothing but palm husks and a goat. Historians still argue whether your bureaucracy was sophisticated or improvised. But you've always known organization is power, and every ledger, every receipt, every grain recorded, that's as powerful as any army. You visit the granaries next. Massive, circular thatched roof structures filled with millet, sorghum, and corn. Enough to feed thousands through drought or siege. You run your hand along the packed walls. This is the quiet part of empire, the unseen strength. Not gold, grain. Your advisors find you here sometimes eyebrows raised. They're used to kings who obsess over thrones, not ones who count sacks of rice, but you know better. You've seen what happens when a hungry city turns desperate. You've seen what trust looks like when it's built on full bellies, and so you keep building. One of your latest projects is a canal system along the upper Niger. The engineers argue constantly. One believes the water should be redirected through artificial banks. Another prefers a natural channeling using carved stone. You let them argue. You even smile at the noise. Because argument means investment, means people care. Elsewhere, you've begun supporting artisans. Not just metal workers or builders, but storytellers, mask makers, dancers. You host a festival once a year, timed with the moon and the harvest. People travel for days to attend. Whole towns empty out. And during that festival, you do something surprising. You perform, not a dance, not a song, but a story. You rise slow and deliberate robes sweeping the ground and speak not as a ruler, but as a man. You tell them a tale about a young boy in Niani who once sat in the back of a room and listened more than he spoke. You describe the first time he held a nugget of gold and didn't feel powerful, only responsible. You end with a simple line, "And I am still learning." The crowd goes quiet, then bursts into cheers. You return to the palace under starlight, your heart lighter than it has been in years. Back inside, you find an old scroll tucked into the corner of your desk. It's a map, not just of Mali, but of the world as you know it. Your caravan routes, your mosques, your trade cities, your borders. You look at it. Not with hunger, not with ambition, but with gratitude. You've gone as far as you ever dreamed. Further even. You came from riverbanks and earthen floors, and now you exist on the maps of people who've never even heard your language. You once walked across continents. Now others will walk through the doors you opened. And when they do, they'll speak your name, not always correctly, not always kindly, but always with the echo of the man who made the world look south just for a moment, and see gold, yes, but also wisdom, faith, and story. Mansa Musa, the man who didn't just build an empire, the man who built memory. The palace is quieter now. Not because fewer people visit, but because you've learned to make space between moments. There's a rhythm to leadership speak, wait, listen. And you've mastered the silence in between. In the early morning, you sit alone in your chamber, tracing your finger along the edge of a carved wooden box. Inside are letters. scrolls from across the empire, notes written in Arabic and Mande in languages you've never spoken but now recognize by their curves. Some are requests, others thanks. A few are simply stories people wanted to tell you. You read them slowly, like tasting honey. Outside life hums on. The royal court still functions, but now it runs on custom rather than command. Visitors know the walkways. Ambassadors understand the rituals. Even your guards, once stone-faced and rigid, have learned the art of standing still with kindness. This morning, a delegation from the Mossi arrives. Traditionally, the Mossi were Mali's rivals, skilled horsemen from the grasslands to the south. But things have changed. You've built alliances slowly, not with swords, but with marriages, gifts, and careful listening. The delegation is small. 2 nobles, 1 elder, and a girl no older than 10 who hides behind her mother's cloak. You kneel when you greet them. This, more than any throne, is what power looks like. They offer you kola nuts and finely woven cloth. You offer them open markets, mutual defense, and the freedom to maintain their language and customs. You don't want a Mali that erases its neighbors. You want one that reflects them like the river reflects the sky. Historians still argue whether this policy was pragmatic or idealistic. The truth is both. Peace is profitable, but it's also deeply personal. You've seen too much to chase war lightly. Later that day, you walk through the eastern wing of the palace where your grandchildren play in the shade of a pomegranate tree. They run in circles, shrieking with laughter, turning your finely raked courtyard into chaos. A servant begins to scold them. You raise your hand to stop her. Let them run. You watch one boy climb the tree with terrifying speed and dangle a fruit from a branch like a prize. You recognize the glint in his eye, that edge of defiance, that hunger. You were like that once. You wonder what kind of ruler he'll become if he rules at all. In the distance, you hear the sound of a kora, a 21-stringed instrument that sings like water falling in slow motion. The griots are rehearsing, preparing to recite your lineage again. You know the story by heart, of course, but you still listen. Because every time they tell it, it changes slightly. You've come to understand something beautiful. No one ever remembers a life exactly. But if enough people remember enough of it, that's immortality. You spend the evening in discussion with your chief architect. The great mosque of Jen needs repair before the floods. The wooden beams, those iconic spines sticking from the walls, must be replaced. You nod. Approve the plans. Offer more workers. Then you pause and add something. Make sure the children are involved. The architect blinks. Children, sire. Yes. Let them help. Let them feel the mud under their nails. Let them know what it means to build something that outlives them. He bows deeply. You retire just after nightfall. Your bones ache. Your breath comes slow. You lie on your woven mat with a light cloth over your legs and listen to the city sleep. Insects chirp. Wind brushes the edge of your lattice window. Somewhere nearby, someone is telling your story again, perhaps to a child half listening, or to a traveler pretending not to be impressed. You close your eyes. You don't dream of gold. You dream of bricks drying in the sun, of ink drying on paper, of names whispered across generations passed from tongue to tongue like a blessing. You dream of Mali, not as it was, but as it will be, and you sleep knowing you helped shape it. The sun rises slower these days, or maybe it just feels that way to you. Your steps across the courtyard are deliberate now, your stride not weakened, but dignified. A servant offers your staff not out of necessity, but out of tradition. You take it anyway. Even symbols need tending. Today, you're heading not to court, not to the garden, but to a school. A new one, built near the mosque, modest in size but ambitious in purpose. You wanted it that way. It's for children who might never see a scroll, otherwise sons of fishermen, daughters of weavers. Their sandals are worn thin, their robes patched with love, but their eyes are wide open. You step into the classroom quietly. The teacher pauses, pupils straighten mouths, clamp shut, but you gesture gently. Keep going. She resumes, pointing to a line of script drawn on a wooden tablet. Arabic, flowing and precise. She asks the children to recite it. They do softly, unevenly, but with heart. You catch a few mispronunciations, but you say nothing. You just smile. And in that smile something stirs. You remember. Not so long ago, you were just a boy squatting in the dust listening to your own tutors, trying to copy words you didn't understand yet, trying to be still even when your knees ached, trying to become the kind of man you are now. Outside, the children line up to receive bread and honey. A daily ritual. You had it arranged yourself. You may not be able to sit beside every child, but you can at least make sure none of them learns on an empty stomach. You watch one boy fold his bread carefully and offer half to his sister. She accepts it with wide eyes and no words. You nod to your aide. Bring that boy a book, you say. One of the good ones. Later that afternoon, you visit the artisans' quarter. This part of the city always feels alive. There's noise here, not the political kind, but the joyful clatter of life. Blacksmiths, hammer potters, shape weavers stretch thread across looms. A woman stirs dye made from crushed hibiscus petals. The fabric glows like fire in the sun. They all greet you, but no one stops working. You've made it clear over the years you respect labor more than flattery. So they keep doing what they do best, making the empire beautiful. You pass a sculptor chiseling a figure from sandstone. It's rough, still just a face and shoulders, but you stop and study it. The man looks nervous. He mumbles that it's meant to be you. Is it, you say? He nods quickly. You tilt your head. Then make sure the eyes look curious. Not tired, not proud, curious. He exhales, nods again, and gets back to work. Historians still argue whether you promoted the arts for legacy or love. The answer you think is simpler than either. You did it because you could, and because Molly deserved beauty just as much as power. You walk home as dusk settles. The sky shifts from mango gold to bruised plum, the first stars timidly winking into view. In the distance, drums begin their evening rhythm. Not a performance, just a reminder that another day has folded into memory. You sit on your balcony, sipping from a carved gourd of hibiscus tea. A cat, scruffy, semi-wild, jumps onto the ledge and settles beside you. You let it. It doesn't ask for anything. You like that. Below, the city glows. Not with torches, not with lanterns, but with the presence of people. Voices. Laughter. A baby crying somewhere. A story being told just loud enough to make someone chuckle. You realize in this quiet moment that your buildings will someday crumble. Your laws will be rewritten. Your scrolls may fade. But this pulse, this culture of giving, learning, questioning, sharing, this will last. Not because it's perfect, but because it's theirs now. You close your eyes as the wind stirs your robe, and for once you let yourself feel what you've avoided for years. Pride, not in what you've owned, but in what you've passed on. The nights stretch longer now. Not colder, Mali's heat still holds even after the sun dips, but deeper. The kind of darkness that invites reflection, not fear. You sit beneath the stars with your back against a carved pillar, listening to the slow, patient hum of the world you helped build. You know the end is approaching. You don't fear it. Death isn't an interruption. It's just another stop along the caravan route. You've already sent word to your scribes to begin organizing your personal library. You've asked that the scrolls be divided between Sankor Jingwereber and Jenna. No single place should hold everything. Knowledge should be scattered like seeds, not locked away like treasure. And speaking of treasure, you've quietly arranged for a portion of your remaining gold to be melted down not for coin, but for tools, for instruments, for ink pots. You'd rather leave behind 10 well-trained doctors than 1,000 unused nuggets. Historians still argue whether your last decade was active or ceremonial. Some claim you withdrew from public life. Others say you ruled until your final breath. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in between. You weren't the man you once were, but you were never absent. You just became more precise. You stopped rushing to every fire. You stopped needing to be in the center of every storm. Instead, you focused on the horizon, the slow unfolding of years ahead that you'd never see but wanted to shape anyway. One evening, your eldest son sits beside you. He's quiet, respectful, and anxious. In that way, sons always are around fathers who built empires. You look at him. He doesn't look back. You don't have to be me, you say. He blinks, surprised. But I must rule. Yes, you nod. But rule as yourself, not as an echo. You pause, make fewer speeches, ask more questions. He nods, a start. You don't name him successor aloud. That's for the council. But your gaze lingers on him longer than the others. You've watched him grow, not just in stature, but in silence. He listens more than he speaks. He doesn't command the room. He waits for the room to come to him. You recognize the pattern. That night the griots perform your lineage again, but this time they ask permission first. You nod. They begin. But halfway through you raise a hand. They stop mid-syllable. Tell me something new, you say. They look at one another. So one begins a story you've never heard. A tale not about you, but about a village you once passed through on your pilgrimage. A boy you gifted a coin. A well that was built from that coin. A woman who used that well to water her garden. A child born healthy because of the food grown there. You close your eyes. That is the story you've always wanted told. You sleep deeply that night. Your breathing, as even as the soft wind rustling through the papyrus blinds. Dreams come in gentle waves. Visions not of palaces or gold, but of ink on hands. Laughter in classrooms, date palms heavy with fruit. In the morning, you wake to find a small clay bowl beside your bed. Inside, salted figs, a piece of honeycomb, and a folded piece of paper. It's from the scholar you met years ago, the one who brought you scrolls on astronomy. He's now a teacher at Sankore. The note is simple. My students asked how far light can travel. I told them farther than even a king's name. You hold the note gently, careful not to smudge the ink. You rise slowly, step into the morning sun, and smile at the sky. Because even if today is one of your last, now, your name won't end here. It will echo in domes and doorways, in books, and blessing songs in trade routes, and quiet footsteps beside desert wells. You are no longer just Mansa Musa, ruler of Mali. You are the rhythm between pages, the pause before a prayer, the gold thread in a story told by firelight. The palace feels slower these days, as if it's matching your pace out of respect. The halls no longer echo with the quick tapping of couriers or the rustle of scribes rushing with scrolls. They walk gently now. They speak softly. Not out of fear, but because the man they serve has entered his final season. And still you rise, not because you must, but because dignity has always been your first language. Today you walk through the central courtyard where the fountain murmurs over polished stone. The scent of crushed mint leaves lingers in the air, your favorite tea. The trees sway lightly, and birds chatter with casual indifference. Life, you realize, is moving on perfectly without you. And that, too, is legacy. You summon your cartographer, a wiry man with stained fingers and a mind full of rivers. Together, you unroll the latest map of the empire. It stretches from the Atlantic coast to the bend of the Niger. Towns marked with careful ink. Dotted lines where trade routes snake through desert. You smile. I never thought it would be this big, you say. He laughs gently. There are still corners we haven't named. Good, you reply. Let the next Mansa find them. You add one final note to the bottom corner of the parchment. Not a signature. Just a phrase in Mande that means, may this map become memory. He nods, rolls it up and leaves. Later, a poet comes to visit. Young. Nervous. His verses are still raw, still bleeding at the edges. But you invite him to sit. He reads one about Timbuktu, a city of libraries lit by oil lamps and starlight. He describes its rooftops like steps toward heaven. You ask him only one thing. Can you describe it without using the word gold? He laughs, then tries again, and this time it's better. You send him off with two things, a new inkwell and your blessing. Historians still argue whether you directly supported the arts or simply allowed them to flourish. But every artist in your court knows the best kings don't write the song, they fund the silence in which it can be heard. In the evening, your body tires more quickly. The stairs seem taller, the walk to the garden a bit longer. You rest often sitting beneath the same tamarind tree, where your grandchildren once raced past like wind with feet. You close your eyes and remember the journey, not just the Hajj, but the whole arc of it. From a quiet boy in Niani to the man who turned the world's gaze southward. You think of Cairo, Mecca, Timbuktu, of salt caravans snaking across dunes, of your hands resting on the shoulders of your sons as they practiced statecraft in your shadow. You've never feared death. But now you feel something different, readiness. You meet one last time with your council. You sit at the circle's center, but you speak less. You watch how they disagree, how they find consensus, how they pause and wait for one another. It's a better court than the one you inherited. And in that you find peace. I leave nothing you say finally, except what you choose to keep alive. They bow not out of formality, but out of love. Afterward, you dictate one final letter. It's not to a king, not to a court. It's to a teacher in Jenne. You thank her for educating children who will never know your name. You ask her to tell them this. Once there was a man who tried to build with books instead of bricks. He failed sometimes, but he kept building. Then you sign it, seal it, and set it aside. The moon is high now. Your room is quiet, save for the rustle of palm leaves outside. You lie back, blanket tucked under your chin. the weight of the world no longer resting on your shoulders, just a cool breeze, the whisper of history, and the soft breath of a man who finally lets go. The dawn after your final breath arrives gently. No morning drums, no sudden gasps, just silence. The kind that knows when it's standing in the presence of something that mattered. Your attendants find you with your hands folded over your chest, eyes closed as if in mid-prayer. There's no chaos, just reverence. Word spreads slowly but surely. First through the palace, then to the city, then across the empire. Riders are dispatched in all directions, galloping through morning fog and desert haze to deliver the message. Mansa Musa has joined the ancestors, and across Mali the people pause. Fishermen on the Niger lower their nets for a moment of stillness. Blacksmiths remove their aprons and bow their heads. In a small village near Walata, a teacher tells her class to close their books not out of grief, but out of gratitude. In Timbuktu, the call to prayer echoes a little longer than usual. The scholars at Sankore gather in the courtyard and read passages aloud from your favorite manuscripts. One of them tears up while reciting a verse about mercy. He doesn't stop reading. You are not buried with your gold. That would be wasteful, and you never believed in hoarding what could help others. Your tomb is simple by royal standards, earthen clean-shaded by acacia trees, but it rests on ground watered by the river you loved. Near a mosque built with your hands, your vision, your faith. Historians still argue where your exact burial site lies. Some say it was hidden deliberately to avoid desecration. Others believe your body was interred deep beneath the sands, your grave known only to the griots. But your people know better. You are everywhere, in every school built from your coin, in every book protected by your scroll rooms, in every morning prayer whispered from rooftops you funded, in every child reciting verse you made sure was translated, in every camel that still walks the gold-salted roads you paved with peace. A griot stands beneath a tree that evening, his kora resting against his shoulder. He begins to sing not of battles or wealth, but of time, of patience, of how long it takes to build something worth leaving behind. He sings your name softly, almost as if not to wake you. Elsewhere, your son sits on the throne, not just by blood, but by preparation. He doesn't imitate you. He rules with his own rhythm. But every once in a while he stops mid-sentence, tilts his head, and asks himself, "What would my father have asked me to do?" And in that question you live on, because legacy isn't just memory. It's momentum. And Mali keeps moving. The salt still flows from Taghaza. The scrolls are still copied by lamplight. The gold, though rarer, now still gleams in sunlit corners of the market. A girl learns to write her name. A boy learns to recite hadith. Neither knows your story in full, but they're walking paths you once cleared. And somewhere, a traveler from the north arrives in Timbuktu, dazed by its splendor. He asks how it came to be. The merchant smiles, gestures toward the skyline of domes and minarets, and says, "There was a man, a king, who dreamed far and walked farther. And now, as the sky fades into a deep twilight and the stars take their places, it's time to let your story rest too. Let it drift like incense through courtyards. Let it ride with the wind over the dunes. Let it settle like gold dust in the minds of the next dreamers. So now, as you rest your head and let your eyes close, think of sand stretching beneath a caravan of camels. soft footfalls across ancient dunes, warm wind brushing against silken robes, and gold not hoarded, but given. Imagine the hush of a city at night where every rooftop holds a secret, and every alleyway once echoed with footsteps that mattered. Breathe in slowly, as if you're walking through the archway of Timbuktu's gates, the stone still warm from the day's sun, the smell of parchment, date bread, and sandalwood rising from the street corners. Exhale gently, like you've just handed a coin to a stranger, like your name was just whispered into a prayer, like the river finally carried your reflection somewhere quiet and kind. And know this, your dreams, big or small, matter, just like Musa's. And in your own way, your kindness, your learning, your steps, can build something that lasts too. Let your breath slow. Let your mind drift. Let Mali fade into moonlight. And sleep deeply now, traveler. You've walked far tonight.